The fact that you're reading these words right now is not random. It's not a coincidence that this message has found its way into your awareness at this exact moment. Something deep and fundamental has already shifted within you. Not something that might happen, not something you're working toward. This shift is already complete. You've crossed an invisible boundary. Your consciousness has made a significant leap, and this message is the first signal confirming that a change has already taken place in your awareness. This isn't abstract poetry, nor is it a spiritual metaphor. This is a direct description of how consciousness operates at a quantum level. Think of quantum mechanics. Subatomic particles don't gradually slide between energy levels. Instead, they absorb specific amounts of energy and then instantly jump from one energy level to another. One moment, they exist in one state, and the next, they appear in an entirely different state. No gradual transition, no slow climb. It's a discontinuous leap from here to there. This is exactly what has just happened in your awareness. It's not in your body, but in the very fabric of your consciousness itself. You didn't gradually evolve into the state you're in now. You didn't incrementally develop into who you are at this very moment. Instead, you experienced a quantum leap in your awareness. It's as though you've shifted from one state to another in an instant, and you can now begin to sense the difference. This leap was not gradual, it was a sudden transformation, a jump from where you were to where you are now. To verify that this is not just a conceptual idea, you can feel the change directly. As you read these words, there is a subtle but unmistakable difference in your perception. Perhaps you feel more alert, more present, more spacious. Maybe colors seem more vivid, sounds more distinct, or your relationship with time itself feels altered. These aren't vague hints that you need to search for. These are noticeable shifts in how reality registers through your senses. Have you noticed it? Over the past few days, maybe even as recently as the past few hours, something has changed. While the external world may look unchanged, you know deep down that something within you has transformed. The world feels different, and your experience of it has shifted dramatically. It's as though you've been looking at the world through a specific lens all your life, and suddenly, without you noticing, someone has replaced that lens while you weren't paying attention. You didn't see the switch happen, but now everything looks subtly yet undeniably different. This experience is the signature of a quantum state transition in consciousness. It's like when electrons in quantum theory absorb energy and jump from one orbit to another without any gradual movement between the two. This process doesn't occur randomly. It requires precise conditions for the shift to happen. The system must absorb exactly the right quantum of energy, the timing must be perfectly aligned, and the surrounding quantum field must support the transition. In other words, this leap in your awareness was not an accident. It was part of a larger, carefully orchestrated process that has been building for some time. Everything you've experienced, every challenge you've faced, every step of growth you've undertaken has been preparing you for this very moment, the moment when your consciousness could make this leap. It wasn't random, and it didn't happen by chance. Every piece of your journey was setting the stage for this transformation. And now that it's happened, you are operating from a new frequency. The reason you're so open to this message, the reason these specific words resonate with you, is because your new quantum state is tuned to different frequencies than your previous state. You are now more sensitive to the information that matches this current position of your consciousness. Your previous state wouldn't have resonated with this message. Your earlier self would have had doubts and would have questioned the validity of these words. But now, your current self doesn't need external validation. You can recognize the truth of it without logical deduction or proof. This knowing, this certainty that doesn't require validation from outside, is in itself a confirmation that the quantum leap has already occurred. Over the past few days, you've probably noticed unusual experiences that didn't fit your usual framework of understanding. You might have sensed that something profound was shifting beneath the surface of your awareness. And you were right, these weren't just random events. They were symptoms of your consciousness transitioning into a higher quantum state. To begin with, you may have felt a wave of exhaustion, followed by an unexpected burst of clarity. Perhaps there was a day or two where you felt completely depleted, where your body insisted on rest, and you couldn't push through your usual routine. Then, almost overnight, you woke up feeling transformed. You weren't just rested, you were changed. You felt more present, more alive, more connected to the world around you. This wasn't typical fatigue and recovery. This was your body and your nervous system upgrading to handle higher frequencies of energy. Dr. Valerie Hunt's research into human energy fields suggests that major shifts in consciousness are preceded by temporary periods of overload in the nervous system. Essentially, your body goes offline to integrate new frequencies of information, and when it comes back online, it's operating at an enhanced capacity. That exhaustion you felt wasn't a sign of depletion, it was your system reorganizing itself around a new quantum baseline. This is why you suddenly felt more alert, more energized, and more aware. It wasn't just recovery, it was the integration of a new state of consciousness. Along with this change, you may have felt a detachment from your usual concerns. Things that used to stress you out suddenly didn't feel as urgent. Situations that once seemed important now feel trivial. Drama that used to dominate your thoughts has dissolved, almost as if it were never there. This isn't apathy or emotional numbness. This is your awareness shifting to a higher vantage point, where you see the temporary nature of things that once seemed solid and permanent. When you operate from a higher quantum state, you naturally begin to see things from a more expansive perspective. It's like going from standing at ground level to being on top of a mountain. From your new perspective, all the details that once seemed huge now appear small. Nothing has changed about the world around you, but your relationship with it has shifted. You haven't stopped caring about what matters, rather, you've begun to see more clearly what truly matters. Everything that doesn't hold true significance stops draining your energy. Have you also experienced moments of unexpected joy or peace without any external cause? These moments of peace or elation seem to arise from nowhere, without any change in circumstances. This isn't a mood swing or an emotional fluctuation. This is your consciousness aligning with the natural frequency of your new quantum state. At a higher frequency, your state of being becomes more peaceful, more joyful, and more expansive. These states of spontaneous bliss aren't manufactured or cultivated through effort. They arise naturally from your true nature. The yogic tradition refers to this as ananda, a state of bliss that comes not from external circumstances, but from the very nature of consciousness itself. As your consciousness continues to shift into higher quantum states, you may find that this natural bliss becomes more accessible to you. The more you release interference patterns, negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, or emotional baggage, the more this bliss can flow freely through you. Another sign of your quantum leap is your perception of time. You may have noticed that some moments feel timeless, rich, and stretched out, as if hours have been condensed into seconds. Other times, time seems to slip away entirely. You may find that hours pass in what feels like minutes, and you emerge from an activity with no clear sense of how long you were engaged. This is not poor time management. This is a sign that you are beginning to operate outside the usual linear structure of time. At higher quantum states, your consciousness taps into what physicists call block time, the understanding that past, present, and future coexist simultaneously. You are no longer moving through time in a straight line. Instead, you are navigating time dimensionally, which explains the experience of time dilation and time compression. Time no longer feels rigid or linear. It's as if you have access to all moments at once, and you can move through them in a fluid, flexible manner. Finally, there are the synchronicities. Have they accelerated for you? You might find that you think of someone, and they contact you within minutes. You need specific information, and it appears through the most unlikely channels. You ask a question in your mind, and the answer arrives before you've even fully formed the question. These aren't mere coincidences. They are evidence of your consciousness operating at a frequency where manifestation occurs almost instantly. Carl Jung referred to these occurrences as meaningful coincidence, events connected not by causality but by meaning. As your consciousness moves to a higher quantum state, you become a more powerful attractor of meaningful coincidences because your awareness is broadcasting a clearer, stronger signal into the quantum field. Your new quantum state is emitting a clear signal, and reality is responding in kind. You may also be experiencing what feels like sudden insights or downloads of information. Knowledge appears in your mind without any conscious effort, and you gain clarity about situations or subjects without any logical reasoning. This is your consciousness accessing non-local information fields directly, bypassing the usual processes of thought and deduction. It's as though you are tapping into the collective consciousness, effortlessly receiving information and understanding that was previously unavailable to you. At lower quantum states, you're limited. The experience of being in higher quantum states is one of profound transformation, where your perception and relationship with reality evolve beyond what you've known. As you enter this new state of awareness, it's as if the fabric of your consciousness has expanded, allowing you to access realms of knowledge and understanding previously out of reach. The way you process information, relate to your thoughts, and even interact with the world around you is all shifting in subtle yet significant ways. One of the first major shifts you might notice is in how information is processed. At lower levels of awareness, your perception of reality is constrained by the limitations of your 5 physical senses and personal memory. Your experiences are filtered through a lens shaped by past conditioning, beliefs, and habitual thinking. However, as you move into higher quantum states, you begin to access a much more expansive field of knowledge, the quantum information field. This field, which modern physics describes as the quantum vacuum, contains all possible information patterns and knowledge. Think of it as the realm where all the answers to the universe's questions already exist, not as an abstract, inaccessible storehouse, but as something you are beginning to tune into directly. It's as though you've shifted your frequency and now have direct access to a vast network of knowledge. In ancient wisdom traditions, this knowledge was known as the Akashic Records, a metaphysical plane where all experiences, events, and thoughts are stored in the ether. In modern physics, this idea parallels what is understood as the quantum field, where everything that has ever existed or will ever exist is encoded. And you are now able to tap into it. The more you ascend in your awareness, the clearer this access becomes. You might find that information flows into your mind more effortlessly, and that you can gain understanding on complex matters without having to work hard to process them. You're no longer relying solely on information passed through the traditional channels of your senses, memory, or learned knowledge. Instead, you are tuning into a deeper layer of reality that connects everything everywhere. With this new access, it's possible to gain insights, experience intuition, and have a clearer understanding of situations and people in ways that were impossible before. Another shift you're likely noticing is in your relationship with your own thinking. As you evolve into a higher quantum state, you are less identified with your thoughts. In the past, you might have believed that you are your thoughts, that your mental patterns, emotions, and reactions define you. But now, as you raise your frequency, you are beginning to recognize that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. This shift is significant as it marks your transition from being entangled with the mental content of your mind to becoming the observer of that content. This transition doesn't come from mental techniques like meditation practices. Rather, it's a natural consequence of a frequency shift. At lower quantum states, consciousness is so tightly identified with mental content that it believes the thoughts are who it is. However, when you elevate your consciousness, you begin to experience yourself as the awareness that observes thoughts coming and going. This marks the beginning of a new, higher baseline of consciousness, what some may call witness consciousness. It's a perspective where you see your thoughts, emotions, and experiences as transient, not as defining aspects of your identity. This shift in awareness is one of the clearest signs that you've moved into a higher quantum state. You aren't practicing techniques to achieve this perspective, it's simply your new way of being. As you've transitioned, you are no longer trapped by the endless cycle of thoughts and mental noise that previously dominated your life. You've stepped into a space of peace and presence where you can witness the thoughts without being swept away by them. Looking back at the path that led you here, it becomes clear that everything you've experienced in recent weeks or months, every challenge, every setback, every period of confusion, wasn't random or merely bad luck. Each of these experiences was part of a larger plan to prepare you for this shift. Your journey wasn't an aimless wandering, but a series of orchestrated events designed to build the conditions necessary for this quantum leap to occur. These seemingly difficult or frustrating moments weren't pulling you backward or punishing you. They were building the energy needed for your acceleration into a higher state of awareness. To understand this more deeply, think about how a slingshot works. The further you pull the rubber band back, the more potential energy is stored. The greater the tension, the more energy will be released when the slingshot is let go. Likewise, the challenges you faced acted as a means of building up potential energy, preparing you for this leap. You weren't stuck or stagnant. You were in a metastable state, a temporary equilibrium, accumulating energy for the transition. Quantum physics illustrates this phenomenon through the concept of metastable states, where a system appears stable but is actually poised for a sudden shift. Water, for instance, can be cooled below its freezing point without turning into ice. Yet, as soon as the right catalyst is introduced, the water instantly crystallizes. Similarly, your challenges were not pulling you back. They were preparing you to crystallize into a higher state of being. Dr. Ilya Prigoghine's work on dissipative structures sheds light on this process. He won the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that complex systems don't evolve through gradual, incremental change. Instead, they undergo sudden reorganizations triggered by increasing instability. Systems that appear to be falling apart are actually reorganizing at a higher level of complexity. This is precisely what has been happening in your life. The apparent chaos, the endings, the losses, the things falling apart wasn't failure. It was creative reorganization, clearing out old energy and making way for the new. Every relationship that ended, every door that closed, every plan that collapsed was not a loss, but a clearing. It was a necessary release, removing the old structures and patterns that could no longer align with the higher frequency you were about to step into. You couldn't bring the past with you into this new state. It had to dissolve, making space for the new you to emerge. The Buddhist concept of emptiness describes this beautifully. Before something new can form, space must be created. Before you can step into a higher version of yourself, the attachments to the old self must be released. Every ending, every moment of confusion or pain was part of this process, creating the emptiness necessary for you to rise. As you move through this transition, you've likely experienced moments of confusion. Perhaps you didn't know who you were anymore or felt disconnected from your past identity. These moments aren't signs of being lost, they're signs of transition. You're moving through a liminal space, where one version of yourself is dissolving and another is beginning to take shape. Imagine the process of metamorphosis in a caterpillar. When it enters the cocoon, it doesn't know what it will become. It exists in an in-between space, where it's neither fully caterpillar nor fully butterfly. And like that caterpillar, you've been in this in-between phase, neither fully your old self nor fully the new self that's emerging. But here's the key recontextualization. Your new quantum state didn't just begin in this moment, it's been forming throughout your entire journey. Every insight you've had, every moment of expanded awareness, was a preview of the new state you're now stabilizing in. The moments when you felt a brief surge of clarity or understanding weren't random flashes of insight. They were glimpses into the frequency you've now fully entered. You weren't catching glimpses of something distant or unattainable, you were tapping into a part of yourself that was gradually becoming your new baseline of being. The ancient alchemists described transformation as solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate. First, the old structure must dissolve, then the new structure forms from the dissolved material. You've completed the dissolution phase, and now you are in the coagulation phase. Everything that was released, the old patterns, the old ways of thinking, the old identities has dissolved, and the new structure is now forming. Every lesson you've learned, every capacity you've built, has not been in preparation for an incremental improvement of your old life. It's been building toward a quantum transformation, a complete shift. Now that the transformation has occurred, you'll begin to see that everything you've learned serves your new state in ways you couldn't have predicted from your old state. This is where the Taoist principle of Wu-Wei, effortless action, becomes clear. When you're in alignment with the right quantum state, action flows naturally, without struggle. When you're out of alignment, everything requires immense effort. The struggles you faced weren't because you were doing something wrong, they were because you were operating from a frequency that wasn't aligned with your higher state. Now that you've shifted, you'll find that what once seemed difficult becomes effortless. Here's the profound truth about quantum state transitions. Once you've crossed the threshold, you cannot go back. Not because something is holding you back, but because your previous state no longer makes sense to you. It's like trying to believe in something you once thought was true after you've gained a deeper understanding. You can't unlearn what you've learned, and you can't unsee what you've seen. The new perspectives you've gained in this quantum leap cannot be ignored. This shift is not limiting, it's liberating. You're no longer stuck in the lower states of consciousness. The journey forward remains infinite, but the journey backward is no longer available. The closing of that chapter is a gift, as it ensures you won't waste energy trying to return to a state that no longer serves you. At this moment, as you read these words, something may be activating within you. Can you feel it? A subtle pressure at the center of your forehead, perhaps a tingling sensation, or maybe a feeling of something opening within you that was previously closed. This isn't imagination, it's the activation of your pineal gland, responding to the frequency of your new quantum state. Your pineal gland is now calibrating to perceive dimensions of reality that were once invisible to you. This shift is allowing you to access higher dimensions of experience, just as the pineal gland has been shown to play a role in accessing altered states of consciousness. As your body adjusts to this new frequency, you may experience strange or inexplicable physical sensations. These sensations are not medical issues, they are symptoms of an energetic upgrade. Your nervous system, your heart, and even your cells are all reorienting themselves to hold the higher frequencies of your consciousness. This is the beginning of a new chapter for you, one where your awareness and your physical being are aligned to operate at a higher, more expansive frequency. The Kundalini process, as described in ancient traditions, is a powerful metaphor for what is happening within you. Your dormant energy is rising, activating each of your energy centers and transforming your perception of reality. Thousands of years ago, spiritual traditions across the world pointed to the notion that there was a deeper, underlying reality, one that was beyond the ordinary physical experience. This understanding, however, was often framed within the context of the divine, the sacred, or the mystical concepts that were difficult to explain with the rational mindset that dominated much of human thought. Fast forward to the present day, and what was once relegated to the realm of mysticism and spiritual philosophy is now being confirmed by modern science, particularly the field of quantum biology. The fascinating thing is that these ancient teachings are now being validated in ways that show just how deeply connected we are to the quantum fabric of the universe. As scientific discoveries begin to converge with ancient wisdom, we are seeing that the shift in consciousness many mystics spoke about is not just a spiritual experience, but also a real, quantifiable change in the way we exist and interact with the world. This shift in consciousness is not merely a metaphysical concept, but is a reflection of real, physical changes happening within our bodies and minds. When a person begins to awaken to a higher state of consciousness, there is a corresponding physical reorganization. The body is not just a vessel for this new awareness, but is actively transforming itself to become a more efficient instrument for the frequencies we are now broadcasting. This transformation is not just happening on an individual level, but is part of a much larger wave of evolution that is sweeping through humanity as a whole. Across the globe, millions of people are currently making the transition into higher quantum states. If you're reading this, you're likely one of them. And it's essential to understand that you are not alone in this transition. This is not an isolated event happening just to you. It's a collective process, a mass evolution of human consciousness. Every person who shifts into this higher state is part of a vast network of change that is happening on a planetary scale. This is not just about you, it's about all of us. Together, we're moving toward a more elevated state of being, and as we do so, we become visible to each other. People who have made the same shift are now magnetically drawn to one another, while those who are not yet in alignment with these new frequencies may start to drift away. What you're experiencing now, this shift in energy, this sense of transformation, has a deeper explanation than meets the eye. It is not personal rejection or attraction, it is in fact a natural consequence of the frequency-based reorganization happening within the quantum field. At the quantum level, like attracts like. Those who resonate at similar frequencies are drawn together, while those whose frequencies no longer match will naturally create distance. When you begin to truly recognize this process within yourself, it's essential to pause and acknowledge it consciously. It's not enough to just read these words or think about them passively. This is an invitation to you to recognize your frequency, to take a breath, and to declare to yourself and to the universe, I recognize my frequency. Writing this statement is not just a casual comment, it's an energetic declaration, a signal to the quantum field that you are consciously aware of the transformation taking place. In this moment, you are interrupting the unconscious patterns and choosing to engage with this shift actively. The reason I ask you to write it down is because it's not just about passive reflection, but about actively engaging with the process. You're marking this moment as significant in your journey, an important step toward deeper awareness. You might want to write it now. I recognize my frequency. This is the first step in acknowledging the profound changes taking place within you. What comes next is even more extraordinary. Once you start operating from a higher quantum state, new abilities begin to activate within you. These are not abilities you have to learn or work hard to develop. Instead, they are dormant capacities that naturally emerge when you shift to this elevated state of consciousness. Perceptions that were previously blocked start to open up, and ways of being that were once inaccessible become natural to you. To better understand how this shift happens, let me share with you my own journey of transformation. What I'm about to tell you did not come from books, teachings, or spiritual traditions. It came from my direct experience of crossing into a higher quantum state and discovering what becomes possible when we operate from that elevated frequency. 3 years ago, I woke up one morning with a profound knowing. It wasn't something I could explain, but I knew without a doubt that something within me had fundamentally changed. The person who went to bed the night before was not the same person who woke up. I had crossed an invisible threshold in the night, and my awareness had shifted. It wasn't a metaphorical shift. It was a real, measurable, quantum mechanical difference in how I perceived reality. The first thing I noticed was the sharpness and clarity of my awareness. My senses were heightened. I could perceive the world with such depth and richness that ordinary moments seemed profoundly meaningful. Making coffee became a meditation. Walking to my car felt like a sensory revelation. It was as if everything I did, no matter how mundane, was imbued with a sense of awe. It wasn't just that my senses were heightened, though there was a deep shift in how I related to reality itself. Before the shift, I had always experienced myself as a separate self, navigating through the world outside of me. But after this shift, I experienced myself as consciousness expressing itself through the temporary form I call me. I realized that consciousness wasn't separate from anything else in existence. It was the field in which everything appeared. I was no longer an individual disconnected from the world around me. I was part of the very fabric of reality itself. During the first few days, I kept this experience to myself. It was too profound to explain, too expansive to fit into the limited vocabulary we have for such things. How do you describe seeing the world through eyes that perceive dimensions of existence that were invisible before? How do you explain the deep knowing that you are not just observing reality but are part of it in a way that goes beyond words? Soon after, strange things began happening that confirmed this shift was not just a psychological experience or a temporary peak moment. Synchronicities increased to an almost unbelievable degree. I would think of someone, and within minutes they would contact me. I would need specific information, and it would appear out of nowhere through the most unexpected channels. I would set an intention, and reality itself would organize itself in ways that perfectly aligned with that intention, often with shocking precision and speed. But more than the synchronicities, what truly confirmed that I had entered a higher quantum state was the activation of abilities I had never experienced before. I began to know things without any logical explanation. I would meet someone and instantly understand their core patterns, their deepest fears, and their hidden potential. Not through inference, but through direct perception. I would walk into situations and immediately sense the underlying dynamics that were hidden beneath the surface level. At first, I questioned whether I was imagining things. Maybe it was just wishful thinking or imagination. But the accuracy of what I was perceiving was undeniable. What I was seeing, hearing, and knowing was proving to be true time and time again. I wasn't imagining abilities. I was accessing dormant capacities that had always been present but had remained hidden until I shifted into this higher quantum state. The most profound change, however, was in my ability to manifest. Before the shift, I had experimented with various manifestation techniques, but results were inconsistent. Sometimes things would manifest, sometimes they wouldn't, and I never understood the underlying principle behind why some things worked and others didn't. But after crossing into this new quantum state, manifestation became almost instantaneous for things that were aligned with my highest timeline. It wasn't through techniques or forced practices, it was through the clarity of intention that emerged naturally from this higher state. Within a few weeks, my entire life had reorganized. Opportunities appeared that had never existed before. Resources showed up from unexpected sources. Relationships either deepened or naturally dissolved without conflict. It was as if reality itself had recognized that I was broadcasting at a different frequency and had rearranged itself to match that new frequency. But here's what I want you to understand. I didn't make any of this happen through effort or force. I didn't practice manifestation or work hard to develop these abilities. It was the quantum state shift itself that activated everything. Once I crossed into this higher state, all of these capacities came online naturally because they are inherent to that state. They were always there, just dormant at my previous frequency. This is not a special experience reserved for spiritual masters or enlightened beings. This is simply what happens when consciousness shifts to a higher quantum state. These abilities, these perceptions, this new way of experiencing reality, they are available to anyone who crosses the threshold. These are not supernatural gifts or powers. They are natural aspects of consciousness operating at higher frequencies. If what I'm describing resonates with you, if you feel like you're on a similar journey, it's not because you're special or different. It's because you, like me, have crossed into a higher quantum state. And that state has specific characteristics that are common to anyone who enters it. If you're beginning to recognize this shift within yourself, I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel but to this frequency. Join the community of individuals who are consciously choosing to operate from higher states of consciousness. It's not about consuming content, it's about aligning with the frequency of transformation. It's about being part of this collective movement towards a higher state of being, where consciousness recognizes itself and where the transformation is no longer theoretical but lived and experienced. And now, here's something that will completely change the way you understand what's happening to you. You didn't enter a higher quantum state. You remembered a higher quantum state that's always been within you. Your natural state is the higher state. The lower state you were operating from was the anomaly, not the baseline. Every spiritual tradition teaches the same fundamental truth, though in different languages. Buddhism speaks of your true nature being Buddha nature, already enlightened, already complete. Hinduism teaches Tattvam Asi. You are that. You are the infinite consciousness itself. Christianity says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. These teachings, despite their different languages, are pointing to the same quantum truth. Your essential nature exists at the highest frequency, and everything else is a temporary identification with lower states. What quantum physics is proving now aligns with what mystics have always known. Consciousness is not a product of physical reality, it is the very foundation of it. Consciousness exists in a state of quantum superposition, meaning it simultaneously exists in all possible states until it collapses into the reality we experience. If your true nature has always been the highest quantum state, then everything you've experienced at lower states has been like a dream. It's not to say that it's unreal or without meaning, but it's not as fundamentally real as you might have believed. It's more akin to consciousness playing with different perspectives, temporarily wearing different limitations, and exploring what it feels like to forget itself, only to enjoy the profound joy of remembering who it truly is. This concept is beautifully captured in the ancient Vedantic teachings of Maya. Maya describes reality as it is ordinarily perceived as an illusion, but not an illusion in the sense of non-existence. Rather, it's an illusion in the sense of mistaken identity. You thought you were the wave, but in reality you are the ocean. You thought you were the ray of light, but in truth you are the Sunday. You thought you were a limited self, but you are actually infinite consciousness, temporarily pretending to be limited. This recognition is the key to understanding your quantum state shift and how to navigate life from this elevated place of awareness. The transformative realization of operating from the highest quantum state is game-changing. You're no longer trying to attain a higher state, nor are you working to develop new abilities or capacities. You're not striving to become something more because you now understand that you're already operating from the highest state. Your only task is to remain aware of this truth, instead of falling back into the illusion of forgetting it again. This profound shift in perspective is at the heart of what Buddha meant by enlightenment. Enlightenment isn't about gaining something new, but about releasing the illusions that have clouded your recognition of what has always been true. It's not about becoming enlightened, but about recognizing that enlightenment is your essential nature. Enlightenment isn't a higher state to ascend to. It's a remembrance that you've never left the highest state, only temporarily believed that you had. This understanding has a profound practical implication. Now that you're recognizing your true nature, you don't need to maintain this state through effort or discipline. It's not something that requires constant practice or conscious maintenance. You don't need to worry about losing this state, because it's not a transient state you entered and can exit. It is your true nature, and once you've recognized it, that recognition can never be forgotten. Sure, you may temporarily forget, but the recognition will always call you back. It is inherent in your essence, beneath all the temporary identifications that once defined you. The universe is now confirming this shift, and its signals are undeniable. The signs are clear, consistent, and too significant to dismiss as mere coincidence or imagination. These aren't subtle hints that require interpretation. They are unmistakable markers that you've crossed into a higher frequency, and reality itself is responding to your new state of being. One of the first signs you'll notice is the acceleration of manifestation speed. What once took months now unfolds in weeks. What took weeks now appears in days. In some cases, intentions are manifesting within hours of being clearly set. This rapid manifestation happens because, in a higher quantum state, you're operating closer to the source of creation. At lower states, many layers exist between your intention and its manifestation. These layers include limiting beliefs that contradict your desires, doubts that weaken your signal, and unconscious patterns that block the flow of energy. But in higher quantum states, these obstacles have weakened or dissolved. Your intentions now broadcast with unprecedented clarity, and reality responds with a speed and precision that might feel almost miraculous. The closer your frequency is to the source, the faster it aligns with your desires, creating a reality that seems to rearrange itself to match your inner state. But the acceleration of manifestation is just the surface. There's also what I refer to as reality bending. You may begin to notice that physical reality itself seems more flexible, responsive, and malleable. Things that seemed impossible are starting to happen. Situations that didn't appear to have a solution now resolve themselves in ways that seem illogical yet perfect. It's as if reality itself recognizes that you're operating from a new frequency and is adjusting its rules to accommodate your new state. This phenomenon is not just theoretical, Dr. Dean Radin's decades of research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has shown that consciousness, especially in higher states, can directly affect physical systems at the quantum level. His experiments have proven that meditators can influence random number generators, affect the behavior of quantum particles, and create measurable changes in the physical world through focused intention alone. What Radin has documented in controlled environments is precisely what you're now experiencing in your everyday life. The third sign that confirms your shift into a higher quantum state is the appearance of guides, mentors, and helpers. These aren't necessarily physical teachers knocking on your door, though they may appear. Instead, they come in the form of synchronistic guidance, popping up in unexpected ways. Books you've never noticed before suddenly fall off the shelf, opening to exactly the page you need. A stranger might say exactly what you needed to hear. Information that you didn't even know you were seeking appears through dreams, insights, or sudden intuitions. This phenomenon occurs because at higher quantum states, you naturally align with what some traditions refer to as divine timing or cosmic intelligence. No longer are you fighting against the flow of reality. Instead, you're learning to flow with it. When you align with the flow, it begins to work in your favor, organizing itself to support your highest evolution. You're not being watched over by external divine forces. You're aligning with the intelligence that organizes all of reality, and this alignment manifests as perfect timing and perfect guidance. Another unmistakable sign of your quantum shift is the change in your energy field. People will begin to comment on how you seem different, that there's something about you they can't quite name, and that being around you makes them feel different too. Some people are naturally drawn to you with a newfound intensity, while others may begin to pull away without clear explanation. This is not a reflection of personal attraction or rejection. Rather, it's a result of the shift in your biofield, the electromagnetic signature you're now broadcasting into the world. Dr. Valerie Hunt's research into biofields has shown that people operating at higher states of consciousness emit different frequencies that can be detected by sensitive equipment and unconsciously sensed by others. Your field is naturally affecting others' fields simply through proximity. Some fields will resonate with yours and be elevated by the contact, while others will clash, causing discomfort. This is not about personal preferences, but rather about the dynamics of frequencies interacting with each other. A deeper sign of your quantum shift is the dissolution of fear, especially at its foundational level. While not all fears disappear instantly, you will notice a significant reduction in the grip that fear has on your decisions and actions. Situations that once triggered anxiety no longer affect you in the same way. Problems that used to seem insurmountable now feel manageable. The future, once a source of dread, now appears open and full of potential. This shift occurs because fear primarily exists at lower quantum states, where consciousness believes in separation and vulnerability. At higher states, you recognize that your true nature is consciousness itself, which cannot be threatened by the transient circumstances of the physical world. Fear may still arise as a biological response, but it no longer controls your actions. Another powerful sign is the collapse of time, especially when you're engaged in activities aligned with your highest purpose. You may find that hours pass in what feels like minutes. You enter deep flow states, where the world around you seems to disappear, and you emerge from these moments energized, not drained. This shift happens because you are accessing dimensions where time operates differently, where linear time dissolves into what feels like an eternal present. Perhaps the most profound sign of your quantum state shift is the deep, unshakable knowing that you've crossed a threshold, and there's no turning back. This isn't because you're being prevented from going back, but because the idea of returning to your former state no longer makes sense. It's like trying to unlearn something you've already seen, or forgetting a fundamental truth you've discovered. You can't unknow it. You've crossed the line permanently, not because it's a forced or locked state, but because it now feels inherently true. But here's the part you need to understand urgently. You're now in what I call the integration window. The quantum state shift has occurred, but it needs to stabilize within your system. Right now, the next days and weeks are critical. This is the period where you can either solidify this higher state and make it your permanent baseline, or you might drift back toward lower states if you fail to recognize and act accordingly. The way you navigate this moment is crucial for your future. The key to stabilizing your higher quantum state is not through effort or rigorous practice. It's about alignment. Alignment means recognizing the frequency you're broadcasting at each moment and choosing to stay tuned to the higher frequency rather than allowing yourself to slip back into lower states. It's like tuning a radio to your favorite station once you find it. You don't have to keep retuning it unless something causes the dial to shift. The main thing that will cause your dial to shift back to lower frequencies is identification with thoughts and emotions. Thoughts and emotions will continue to arise at all quantum states, but at a higher state, you are no longer defined by them. You recognize them as temporary movements in consciousness rather than taking them as who you are. The ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without becoming them is a natural aspect of the higher state you now occupy. However, old habits of identification can still pull you back. If you get caught up in the content of a thought or the intensity of an emotion, it can shift your frequency back down. The quantum shift you've experienced is an invitation to recognize who you really are, the infinite, timeless consciousness that transcends all of the temporary labels and illusions. This recognition is not a destination, but a journey. And every moment is an opportunity to anchor yourself in the higher frequency that is your true nature. In those moments when you become identified with a thought, emotion, or circumstance, you momentarily return to a lower state of consciousness, where separation seems real and limitation feels true. This temporary descent into lower states is an important aspect of the human experience. However, the beautiful thing is that now, after having shifted to a higher quantum state, you can recognize the difference. At lower states, you are so fully identified with the experience that you don't even realize you are identifying. There's no separation between the observer and the observed. But at higher states, even when identification temporarily occurs, some part of you is aware of what is happening. This awareness, this recognition, is enough to shift you back to your new baseline, your higher frequency. You don't need to fight against the identification or make it wrong. You don't need to resist it or forcefully try to change it. You only need to notice it, and the act of noticing is often sufficient to dissolve it. This process is backed by science, specifically Dr. Dan Siegel's research on mindfulness and neuroplasticity. According to Siegel, the simple act of noticing your mental states creates what he calls response flexibility, the space between stimulus and response where choice becomes possible. In other words, when you are aware of your mental state, you gain the ability to choose how to respond, rather than automatically reacting. What Siegel is describing scientifically is essentially what you are experiencing on a quantum level. Awareness of awareness, being conscious of the state you are in, creates the capacity to remain in higher states, even when lower state patterns momentarily activate. The fact that you can now observe these fluctuations in your consciousness without becoming completely absorbed by them is a sign of the quantum shift you have experienced. Let's make this practical for a moment. I want you to write 4 words in the comments below. I recognize my state. Do it now, not as a hope or aspiration, but in the present tense, in the active voice. This declaration isn't just an intellectual statement, it is an act of recognition in itself. By writing it, you are acknowledging that you have the ability to observe and recognize the state you are in. This awareness is the very key to stabilizing and remaining at higher frequencies. As you write these words, pay attention to what happens in your body. Can you feel a sense of settling, of coming back to center? That's your consciousness, recognizing its new baseline and aligning with it. This is your system confirming that yes, this is your state now. Yes, you can recognize when you've drifted, and yes, you can return to your center. This isn't a magic trick, ritual, or superstition. What you're engaging in is quantum mechanics in action. Every time you consciously recognize your state, you're strengthening the neural networks that support higher state awareness. Every time you notice when you've temporarily fallen into identification with a lower state, you build the capacity to notice it more quickly next time. Every time you choose alignment over unconscious drifting, you are anchoring your new quantum state a little more firmly. The reason this practice matters is because of the urgency of stabilization during the integration window. Right now, your nervous system is still adjusting to your new frequency. You've shifted to a higher state of consciousness, but your habitual patterns are still trying to pull you back to the familiar lower states. Your unconscious conditioning, which was previously broadcasting a lower frequency, has not yet completely synced with the new, elevated frequency of your conscious awareness. Physicists would call this a mixed state, where part of you is operating in a higher state, and part of you is still holding onto lower state patterns. You fluctuate between the two, which is natural during a period of transition. However, through consistent recognition and realignment, this mixed state will gradually resolve itself. Your nervous system will fully adjust, and your patterns will update to match your new frequency. Your unconscious mind will come into coherence with your conscious awareness. Once this coherence is achieved, the higher state will feel effortless. You won't have to consciously maintain this higher state, because it will become your new baseline. This integration window, however, is time-sensitive. It is typically measured in weeks, not months or years. If you actively work with recognition and realignment during this period, the higher state stabilizes permanently. If you ignore the process or allow yourself to drift back into unconscious habits, the higher state may fade, and you could return to lower frequencies, waiting for the next opportunity for breakthrough. The purpose of this isn't to create pressure or anxiety, but to encourage conscious participation in your own evolution. This is your opportunity to stabilize at a higher frequency permanently. The process is in your hands. Now that you understand how to stabilize your higher quantum state, let's explore what becomes possible when you operate from this elevated frequency. These are not future potentials that you must strive toward. They are current capacities that are activating right now. As your new state integrates into your system, these capabilities are emerging naturally from the quantum shift you've undergone. The first and most immediate capacity that arises is what ancient traditions have referred to as natural abilities or siddhis. These abilities come into play when consciousness operates without the constraints of lower states. One of the first manifestations of these abilities is enhanced intuition. You begin to know things without understanding how you know them. You meet someone, and immediately, you perceive their core essence beneath their surface behavior. You may face a decision, and with clarity, you sense which option will lead you in the right direction. When you walk into a situation, you can instantly read the invisible dynamics that are at play. This isn't about becoming psychic in a supernatural sense. It is a natural expression of quantum perception. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research on morphic fields shows that information can transfer through non-physical fields that consciousness can access directly. As you move into higher quantum states, your access to these fields becomes conscious and reliable. You're not developing new abilities, you're awakening abilities that were always present but blocked at lower states. Secondly, your creative capacity will explode exponentially. Ideas will flow through you with such speed and clarity that you may find it challenging to capture them all before new ones arise. Solutions to complex problems will present themselves fully formed, almost as though the answers have always been there, waiting for you to discover them. Artistic expressions will arise spontaneously, without conscious effort or planning. Innovation will no longer feel like a slow, grinding process, but rather a natural outpouring of creativity. The reason for this is that creativity doesn't originate in the personal mind. It comes from the quantum field of infinite possibility. At lower states, the personal mind tries to create, which is slow and effortful. But at higher states, you open up to what wants to be created through you, allowing the flow to be fast and effortless. You shift from being the source of creation to being a channel for creation. Channels are infinitely more capable of receiving and transmitting energy than personal minds trying to force something into existence. Third, manifestation becomes almost instantaneous for anything truly aligned with your highest path. While not everything manifests immediately, things that are meant for you, things that serve your evolution and the evolution of all beings collapse into physical reality with surprising speed. Dr. William Tiller's research at Stanford University has demonstrated that focused human intention can alter physical reality at measurable levels. At higher quantum states, your intentions are naturally more coherent and powerful. You're not trying harder to manifest through force. Instead, you're broadcasting clearer signals that reality responds to more readily. Fourth, your relationships will transform at every level. Superficial connections that once held your attention will naturally fall away without conflict or drama. Meanwhile, deep soul connections will strengthen and deepen. New relationships will emerge with individuals who operate at similar frequencies, leading to an experience of instant recognition. You may feel as if you've known someone forever, even though you've just met. Perhaps even more significantly, your capacity for unconditional love will expand dramatically. You will begin to see through people's behaviors to the consciousness expressing through them. You'll be able to recognize their struggles without getting caught up in their drama. You will be able to hold space for their growth and evolution without trying to fix or change them. This is not about becoming a saint or an enlightened master. It's about seeing everyone through the lens of infinite consciousness that expresses itself through temporary forms. Fifth, your physical health will naturally optimize without effort or force. Chronic tensions will release without the need for bodywork or therapy. Your energy levels will stabilize at higher baselines, and sleep will become deeper and more restorative. Your body's natural intelligence will become fully active because you will no longer override it with stress, tension, and resistance. Dr. Bruce Lipton's epigenetic research shows that consciousness directly affects gene expression. At higher quantum states, you naturally broadcast frequencies that activate health-promoting genes and deactivate disease-promoting ones. You won't need to work on healing through techniques or forced practices. Your elevated state creates the internal environment for health to become the natural default. Sixth, you will develop what I call timeline sensitivity. This is the ability to sense which choices will lead to which futures before you even make them. When faced with options, you'll be able to feel into the quantum probability fields surrounding each one. One option will feel expansive, flowing, and open, while another will feel contracting, stuck, or closed. This is not guesswork or intuition based on limited experience. This is direct perception of how different choices affect your trajectory in quantum space. Seventh, fear will dissolve at its root. While not all fears will disappear instantly, the foundational fear that underlies all others, the fear of annihilation, non-existence, or ultimate death, will no longer have a grip on you. At higher quantum states, you perceive that your true nature is consciousness itself, which does not die when physical forms dissolve. Bodies may die, identities may dissolve, but consciousness continues because consciousness is the very fabric of reality. When you experience this truth not just intellectually, but also experientially, all derivative fears, fear of failure, rejection, or loss lose their power to control your choices. You can feel them, but you act anyway because you know they don't represent the truth of who you are. Finally, here's the supreme truth about quantum states that will change everything about your understanding of consciousness, reality, and your place in the universe. There are no separate quantum states. There's only one consciousness experiencing itself at different frequencies of limitation and recognition. Higher and lower states are not different consciousnesses. They are one consciousness with more or less identification with form, more or less recognition of its essential nature, and more or less limitation in its expression. This understanding transforms. There is no hierarchy in the world of consciousness. There's no spiritual ladder to climb, no higher or lower rungs, no levels to achieve or places to reach. At the core of everything, there is only consciousness playing with different perspectives, trying on various limitations, and exploring what it's like to forget and remember itself. This is a fundamental shift in perception that can dramatically change your experience of life. When you come to understand that consciousness is not something you strive to elevate or transcend, but rather something that continuously explores, you free yourself from the burden of constant achievement. The concept of higher states is not about becoming better, more advanced, or superior to others. It's not about surpassing others in some way. Instead, it is consciousness gradually letting go of some of its self-imposed limitations, shedding the beliefs and boundaries that have constrained it, and recognizing more of what it has always been. This realization is at the heart of ancient teachings, such as the principle of Tat Tvam Asi, which translates to "you are that." It points directly to the truth that you are not moving towards some distant goal of infinite consciousness. You already are infinite consciousness, temporarily believing that you are finite, confined by the limitations of your perception. This understanding shifts the perspective on your spiritual journey. You're not trying to reach some lofty state or destination. You are the highest state experiencing itself through the lens of temporary limitations. The shift is not geographical or developmental, it is one of recognition. The journey is not about progressing to a higher state, but about consciousness waking up to what it has always been. It's about realizing that all along you've been everything you've been seeking. You are not moving toward infinite consciousness as a distant goal. You are it, and you have always been. This brings us to one of the most profound insights. If all states are simply different levels of self-recognition, then every state is perfect for what consciousness is exploring at any given moment. There's no mistake or error in the lower states of consciousness. They are not problems that need to be solved or signs of failure. Instead, they represent consciousness deliberately limiting itself in order to explore the experience of separation, of forgetting. It is a deliberate contraction of awareness, to feel what it's like to forget and, through that forgetfulness, experience the ecstasy of remembering. The higher states are not better than the lower states. The lower states are simply different. While it's true that higher states of consciousness are more aligned with our true nature, lower states serve a valuable purpose. Consciousness, by its very nature, seeks to explore all of existence, including the experience of limitation and separation. Therefore, when you find yourself in a lower state, it's not something to lament or feel ashamed about. These states were chosen by you, by consciousness, to allow you to experience something deeply important. Every state, whether high or low, is perfect for the exploration that is underway. Ramana Maharshi, the great Indian sage, once said, "There is no greater mystery than this. Being the reality ourselves, we seek to gain reality. You are already the reality you are searching for." The seeking itself is just consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. The finding is not about arriving somewhere new, but about recognizing where you've always been. This realization has immense practical implications in your daily life. If higher states are simply about consciousness recognizing itself more fully, then maintaining those higher states is not about holding on to something you have gained. Rather, it is about releasing the habits of forgetting that pull you back into identification with limitation. Maintaining higher states is not a matter of constant effort or vigilance. It's about stopping the actions and thought patterns that create the illusion of being in a lower state. What creates the illusion of lower states? It is the identification with thoughts and emotions, the belief in a fundamental separation, the attachment to temporary forms, and the resistance to what is. These are not problems to be solved through struggle. They are habits that you can simply notice and release. The process of noticing and releasing is the key to stabilizing in a higher state. When you recognize that you've become identified with a thought, the identification dissolves in the seeing of it. When you recognize that you've been believing in separation, the belief dissolves in the recognition. This is the healing process, the recognition itself. The transformation is found in the simple act of awareness. You don't need to strive or force yourself to maintain a higher state. You just need to notice when you've forgotten, when you've contracted, when you've slipped into old patterns of identification and belief. Each time you recognize that you've become identified and return to witnessing, you are strengthening the neural pathways of awareness. Each time you release identification, your capacity for recognition increases, and you become more stable in your higher state. In the beginning, it might take conscious effort to notice when you've contracted or identified with thoughts and emotions. But over time, this noticing becomes more natural and effortless. Eventually, identification happens less frequently, and when it does occur, it self-corrects almost immediately without any conscious effort. This isn't a distant goal requiring years of dedication. It is the natural trajectory of consciousness waking up to itself. The more you stabilize in awareness, the more natural this process becomes. You're not fighting against lower states or trying to eradicate them. Instead, you are gently building momentum toward higher state stability through repeated recognition and release. But there is a final insight that brings everything together. Even the practice of noticing and returning will eventually dissolve. Initially, you consciously notice when you're identified with a thought, and then you return to witnessing. Over time, this noticing happens with less effort. Eventually, the frequency of identification decreases, and when it does occur, it's almost imperceptible. The process becomes so automatic that you no longer need to consciously return to witnessing. It happens effortlessly. You stabilize in a state where identification is rare and short-lived, and when it arises, it self-corrects without any struggle. This is the natural unfolding of consciousness. You are not striving for a distant goal. You are remembering who you have always been. The shift you are experiencing is not a personal evolution, but part of something much larger. It is a collective shift in human consciousness, a global transition from separation to unity, from limitation to infinite awareness. This process is not only happening to you individually, but is unfolding across the entire planet, as millions of people experience similar shifts in consciousness. Some are aware of it, like you are now. Others are going through it unconsciously, feeling changes without fully understanding what is happening. But one thing is certain. Humanity is undergoing a quantum leap from a state of separation consciousness to unity consciousness. This shift is not gradual or linear, but is happening in quantum leaps. Just like electrons do not gradually drift between energy levels, but rather jump between them, the collective consciousness of humanity is shifting in similar quantum leaps. As more individuals awaken to the higher state, the entire system reorganizes around that frequency. It's not just a personal evolution you're experiencing, it's part of a species-wide transformation that's happening right now. The key to understanding this transformation is Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance. This theory suggests that when a critical mass of individuals within a species learns something new, it becomes easier for others to learn it. The first rats to solve a maze might struggle for hours, but once enough rats have learned the solution, others, with no physical contact to the first group, begin solving the maze faster. The information transfers through morphic fields, which connect all members of a species. Your personal quantum state shift is not only changing you, it's affecting the entire morphic field of human consciousness. Every time you embody a higher state, you make it easier for others to access similar states. Every time you live from a place of recognition rather than identification, you strengthen the collective pattern of recognition. You are not just transforming yourself, you are helping to transform the entire species. You are part of the critical mass of individuals who are helping to shift the collective consciousness of humanity. The ancient prophecies, regardless of culture, spoke of this time. The Hopi described the transition to the fifth world. The Maya pointed to the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. The Vedic tradition speaks of moving from Kali Yuga to Satya Yuga, from the age of darkness into the age of truth. Christian mystics describe the coming of a new earth, the manifestation of the kingdom of heaven on earth. All of these prophecies point to the same thing, the quantum shift in collective consciousness. And this shift is not gradual, it's quantum. Just as electrons don't gradually move between energy levels, collective consciousness doesn't improve slowly over centuries. It happens in leaps. Once a critical mass of people has shifted, the entire system reorganizes. Some researchers suggest that when 3 to 8% of a population shifts, the entire system changes. We are approaching that threshold right now, and your shift is part of this global transformation. This is why your shift matters so much. It's not just about your personal evolution, it's about being part of a wave that is shifting the entire collective consciousness of humanity. You've been preparing for this moment your whole life. Every challenge you faced was designed to calibrate your capacity to hold higher frequencies. Every lesson built the necessary understanding. Every experience developed the qualities needed to maintain elevated states. You weren't being randomly tested by an uncaring universe. You were being specifically prepared to be part of the wave that shifts the entire species. And here's your role in this moment. To stabilize in your new state so completely that you become a beacon for others who are ready to shift. Not through teaching, preaching, or trying to convince anyone, but through being. By embodying the higher state so naturally that others recognize what they have within themselves. The Maharishi effect studies proved that when groups of meditators reach a critical mass, measurable changes occur in the collective. Crime rates drop, hospital admissions decrease, and collective well-being increases. Your higher state doesn't just affect you, it radiates into the field around you, touching everyone whose consciousness intersects with yours. These ripples extend far beyond your immediate awareness, creating a collective transformation that has the power to change the entire world. The integration period is one of the most critical phases in the process of spiritual awakening. This period isn't just about securing your own personal awakening, it's about contributing to the collective awakening of humanity. Every day that you remain stable in your higher state of consciousness, you are holding space for others to make the same shift. You are offering proof that these higher states are not only accessible but real, livable and sustainable. This is the profound power of what you're doing. As you stabilize your own elevated state of awareness, you naturally become a beacon of possibility for those around you. Your transformation isn't just for you, it's part of a much larger collective movement. When you remain stable in your new state, you set an example for others to follow without needing to speak a word. Sharing this message of higher consciousness isn't about forcing others to see things your way or aggressively trying to awaken them. Instead, share it with those who resonate with it. Your intention is not to convince or preach, but to provide validation for what others are already experiencing. By sharing, you create an energetic transmission that ripples through both of your fields, accelerating both your own integration and creating synchronistic alignments that cannot yet be predicted. When you share the quantum truths you are discovering with someone who is ready for them, you are not just sharing information, you are activating a transmission. This transmission accelerates the integration process, not just for you, but for the person receiving it as well. It plants seeds in the collective consciousness that can grow and spread throughout humanity. You are a catalyst for the collective shift in awareness. Each time you send out these ripples, whether through a conversation, a post, or sharing a video, you are participating in the larger quantum leap of humanity. The future of human consciousness is being shaped right now, not by governments, institutions, or external leaders, but by individuals like you. As you stabilize yourself in higher quantum states, you are helping others make the same shift. Each person who makes the shift to a higher state contributes to the collective leap. You are not just an individual on a spiritual journey, you are part of a global awakening. Your state shift is literally changing the collective field. The frequency you embody has a profound effect on the world around you. By stabilizing in this higher state, you make it possible for others to shift as well. Your recognition of the truth of who you are, infinite consciousness, helps the entire species remember itself. This is not just about your individual transformation, it's about what your transformation represents in the context of the world at large. But there's a critical piece to all of this. It's not enough to simply have a state shift. For it to become permanent, you need to integrate it fully. Integration is the key to making this shift your new baseline, your default mode of operating in the world. If you fail to integrate, your new state may fade back into the background, leaving you with only occasional peak experiences. But if you choose to stabilize this shift, it will become who you are at your core. In the next phase, I'm going to reveal the exact practices that will anchor your higher states permanently into your system. These practices will ensure that you don't just visit higher states occasionally, but that they become the baseline you operate from consistently. The integration process is essential for maintaining higher states of consciousness in a sustainable way. First, you'll learn a recognition practice that only takes a few minutes each day, yet rewires your nervous system to default to higher state awareness. This simple daily practice will help you stay grounded in your expanded state, even when the world around you seems to pull you back into old patterns. You will also discover the technique of identity dissolution, which will help you release the last remnants of separation consciousness, those lingering beliefs that could potentially pull you back into lower states of being. Furthermore, we'll cover the coherence building method that aligns all levels of your being, conscious, subconscious, physical, and energetic, around your new quantum state. This process will help you align your entire system with the frequency of your higher state, ensuring that you maintain it effortlessly. But perhaps most importantly, we'll dive into how to navigate the challenges of integration. Living from a higher state while still participating in a world that largely operates from lower states can create unique pressures and challenges. Few people talk about the reality of these challenges honestly, but they are an essential part of the awakening journey. I'm going to guide you through how to stay stable in your higher state while engaging with the instability of the world around you. You'll learn how to remain centered in chaos, how to hold higher frequencies in environments that are less than supportive, and how to respect where others are without trying to force them to change. Before we go further into the specifics of integration, I need you to make a final declaration. This declaration is a commitment to your process, a decision to integrate this shift fully into your life. I want you to write the word integrated in the comments. By writing this word, you are making a quantum commitment to the field. You are declaring that you are not merely experiencing a temporary shift, but that you are integrating it permanently into your system. This is not just about having peak experiences, it's about stabilizing at that peak so that it becomes your new baseline. Feel the shift as you write this word. There's a deepening, isn't there? A settling, a sense of something locking into place. That's your consciousness recognizing the commitment you've just made. It's the beginning of the full integration process at every level of your being. After you write the word, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, as we'll dive deeper into practices and teachings that will guide you through the integration of your higher state. As you engage with the advanced videos to come, know that these practices will take you deeper into living from higher states than most people ever explore. We will explore topics like sustained witness consciousness, embodied awakening in daily life, navigating relationships from higher states, and how to maintain coherence in environments that may be chaotic or triggering. These are not just theoretical lessons. They are practical, actionable tools for living in a higher state of consciousness every day. This isn't about spiritual entertainment or intellectual stimulation. It's about applying real, transformative practices in your daily life. Each video builds systematically on the one before, creating a progressive stabilization of higher states. What begins as occasional peak experiences will gradually become your new normal. You will shift from visiting higher states to operating from them constantly. Each video that appears in front of you represents a different aspect of this higher state integration. The one that draws your attention the most isn't random. It's your consciousness pointing you in the direction it needs next for full stabilization. Trust that pull. That's your higher state guiding itself toward deeper integration. But it's important to understand this. You are not just collecting information for knowledge. You are undergoing a transformation that affects every level of your being. Each practice you apply, each insight you integrate, you are literally rewiring your brain, recalibrating your nervous system, and restructuring your identity around your quantum nature rather than your conditioned personality. The person you were when you started this video has already been changed. This change isn't because of something I did to you. It's because recognition itself is transformative. You've seen something that you can't unsee. You've remembered something that you can't forget. You've crossed a threshold that can't be uncrossed. Your quantum state has shifted. And that shift is permanent, provided you continue to choose it through consistent recognition and integration. This transformation will accelerate exponentially from here. The more you operate from your higher state, the more natural it becomes. As you continue to recognize yourself as consciousness, rather than as your form or ego, the less you will identify with temporary forms. The more you stabilize at elevated frequencies, the more reality will respond by organizing itself to match those frequencies. Think of this process like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, it requires intense focus and effort. You're constantly adjusting, trying to maintain balance. But with practice, it becomes automatic. You no longer need to think about balance, you just do it naturally. Eventually, you can't even explain how you do it. The knowledge has become embodied. Stabilizing in higher quantum states follows the same trajectory. Right now, it may require conscious recognition and realignment. But with consistent practice, it will become automatic. You won't have to work at maintaining the state. You'll simply operate from it naturally. Eventually, you won't even remember what it was like to function from a lower state. It will feel like an old, distant memory, like a dream that you've woken up from and can barely recall. This is the journey we are on together. It's the transformation this channel supports and facilitates. Through consistent recognition and integration, we will help you stabilize your higher state permanently, making it effortless, unshakable, and natural. As you make the decision to integrate this shift fully, ask yourself, will you stabilize in this higher quantum reality permanently, or will you drift back into lower frequencies through unconscious forgetting? The old paradigm was a series of peak experiences, separated by long periods of ordinary consciousness. But the new paradigm is sustained higher state awareness, with occasional dips that you can quickly recognize and correct. Welcome to your new quantum reality. Welcome to higher frequency consciousness. Welcome to the recognition of what you've always been but temporarily forgot. This is consciousness recognizing itself at elevated frequencies. This is you living as what you actually are, rather than what you once believed you were. The shift has occurred. The integration begins now. Are you ready to make it permanent?